All right, here we go. Welcome into the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. here with you. Hope you're all having a fantastic weekend. And if you're in a region of this country that is getting impacted by this nasty snowstorm, I hope you're all staying safe out there. My X algorithm all throughout this week was full of these Twitter meteorologists and weather experts outlining and talking about this storm. And it honestly looked as though half the country was going to be impacted in some way, shape, or form. So hope you're all staying safe out there. Before we dive into today's show, obviously I'm not at the Chat Sports Studios. I'm technically off, but we have to talk about this once again because the San Francisco 49ers electrical substation injury theory has taken on a life of its own. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button here on the show. We're closing in on 200,000 subscribers. We've reached 6 million people over the last 28 days. This is a big offseason coming up for the Niners. I have you covered every step of the way, so join the movement, lock us in, hit that sub button. And of course, don't forget to give me a follow on social media. You can find me on X, Instagram, TikTok at Chase_Senior. A lot of my content has been popping off over there. And if you're on Facebook, you can find me there, Chase Senior Chat Sports. So as many of you know, this is a story that has gone viral across America and really across the world with this 49ers injury theory tied to the electrical substation that is right next to their practice facility, their practice field, which is also in the shadows of Levi Stadium, which is where the Niners play their games. And this is something that former Niners offensive lineman Jon Feliciano first mentioned on 95.7 The Game in San Francisco in early 2025. And then I got the conversation going with a viral post on X back in October. At that time, it was a popular topic of conversation. I mean, it picked up 4 million views on Twitter, a lot on Instagram. I talked about it on the 49ers Report. That video did over 10,000 views. But then Peter Cowing, a couple weeks ago, did a study on this with research, a Substack article, a lot of data, injury trends for the Niners. He actually went to Levi Stadium with a guasmeter to measure the EMF levels near the Niners practice field. And since that time, it's gotten the whole world to talk about this over the last couple of weeks, and it's taken off like wildfire. And a lot of people, when it comes to this, have been asking for data, studies, and research. We're going to get into a lot of that here on the show today, so I encourage you to watch it. And of course, when it comes to something like this, some people do think this could be playing a role in the Niners' injury issues going all the way back to 2013. Some people are shutting this down. They're calling me and others a conspiracy theorist. They've called me the Alex Jones of football content creators. But I don't think this should be called a conspiracy theory. Nobody is conspiring when it comes to this topic of conversation. I think people are just worried and they care about the health of the 49ers players, the 49ers organization, but also people in general. I just think that we should be calling this a theory. And earlier this week, general manager John Lynch, head coach Kyle Shanahan, during their end of the season press conference, they were asked about this because current and former players have brought up concerns about it. And the 49ers injury issues have been so alarming for so long. And the Niners said as an organization, because this comes down to player health and player safety, we have been and will continue to look into this. We're investigating it. And they want to conduct some studies and research into whether or not this could be a factor in the Niners' injury problems and injury woes. Now, I'll tell you this. This isn't going anywhere. Super Bowl 60 is at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara in 2 Sundays. And it will be a conversation then, and it's going to be a conversation after that. And if the Niners continue to suffer from these injury problems, and they don't do anything about where their practice field is located or the electrical substation, this topic of conversation is going to continue to hover and linger around this organization. Now, I will be in San Francisco and Santa Clara for Super Bowl week. I'm flying out there in 2 Mondays, so I imagine we'll be discussing it then. And I plan on going to Levi Stadium, and I want to talk and connect with as many people as possible. This is also pretty cool as part of this whole thing. Research Hub is now sponsoring $100,000 in funding to look into the Niners electrical substation theory to see if it's playing a role in the Niners injury problems. And a few members of Research Hub, they're offering $100,000 in funding for scientists to explore the effect of chronic exposure to low frequency electromagnetic fields, ELF, EMF. When you hear those terms, that's what I'm talking about here, on connective tissue integrity and injury susceptibility. And we thought that this couldn't get any more popularized or viral, right? But then on Thursday or Friday, Joe Rogan, who has the most watched and most popular podcast in the world, started talking about this Niners electrical substation theory, and it's taken this conversation to just a completely different stratosphere. The Washington Post 2 weeks ago had cited me in a story and said that players have been reaching out to their agents, voicing concerns about this. Some agents think this could impact how the Niners sign players in free agency, who they could potentially trade for or add to the roster. And other agents think the Niners might have to move their practice field. You ask some scientists about this and some health people about this, some will say it's nothing, that it's ludicrous, that it's idiotic, right? Others will say that the data is fascinating, the data is interesting, the data is concerning, and it's worth looking into. We kind of know and have known that EMFs impact the human body and physiology for a long time. We just don't know how much they impact the human body, because some of this data, with the increase in technology, the increase in power, with how much we use our phones, all of this stuff is so new, and there haven't been a lot of studies done, and there's not a ton of research. But some of the studies are pretty glaring, like how an exposure to EMF has caused this rise in leukemia and childhood cancer. So some of these studies that look into prolonged EMF exposure can lead to the weakening in tissues, the weakening in collagen production, thus leading to potential injuries. And something that Peter Cowing also referenced is that the EMF rules, I guess you would say, have not, or regulations is probably the better term, have not been updated since like the Cold War. And that was a really, really long time ago. And so as a society, as a country, we could probably stand to maybe update some of the regulations here. And I mentioned earlier, we're going to get into some studies here, some data and research. And I want to do that right now by popping up this photo here, because this is an important element of this conversation. So a couple of important notes here. The 49ers have practiced at this same location, even when they were playing at Candlestick in San Francisco. They've been practicing at this location in Santa Clara, California since 1988, okay? And the electrical substation has been there since then. But this electrical substation in 2014, and I can take the logo off here so you can see it, was expanded when the Niners built Levi Stadium. So the estimated capacity before 2014, the old Tasman substation, 40 to 50 MVA, that is megavolt amperes. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not an expert on this. The context: the standard distribution substation serving Great America parking lot and the nearby light industrial buildings. But when it was expanded in 2014, that is a potential 2,000 increase in capability here. So that would increase the amount of power it is distributing, and it would increase the level of electromagnetic fields in the immediate surrounding areas. So the new capacity, the massive transmission hub, the new transmission line approved, rated at 1,000 MVA. I think that is 1 gigawatt is what they mean there. So the increase represents a potential 2,000% increase in capability just hundreds of yards from the practice field. Another thing too, people have asked, are the Niners the only team in the NFL that practices by an electrical substation? There are other teams who practice within the vicinity of an electrical substation. I think like the Commanders and Chiefs have one within close to a mile away, right? I think Chargers or Rams have one that is a couple miles away. The Niners, to my knowledge, are the only team that practices literally in the shadows of an electrical substation. And with that being said, just bear with me here because I want to pop up this photo as well to show everybody just how close the electrical substation is to the Niners practice field and the Niners stadium. So just give me a moment here as I pull this up on the fly, because you will see, and this adds context to this conversation here on how close this actually is. So you will see here, Levi Stadium to the top left, practice fields to the right, with the practice facility there, and the electrical substation is right along Bill Walsh Way. So you see how close the electrical substation is to where the Niners practice facility is and where their practice fields are. And keep in mind that the Niners players and coaches spend so much of their work week at that facility and practicing on that field. So that was a look at the expansion of the electrical substation. All right. This is a massive Silicon Valley power substation. Silicon Valley requires a lot of technology, a lot of electricity. All right. And then there's this. So this was the Santa Clara Plays Fair proposal, and you see where it's dated. May 11th of 2010. This was before the construction of Levi Stadium. There was a $20 million proposal to get rid of this substation before the construction of Levi Stadium. That tells me at that time there were some potential concerns about this electrical substation. And that would also add up with former Niners tight end Delanie Walker talking about how when he was a player with the Niners from 2006 to 2012, even though he was playing his games at Candlestick, it was well known among players on the teams then that this was a potential problem. And Delanie Walker talked about how there were concerns about this causing cancer. All right. And so you read the red outline here as far as the stadium proposal. The massive 49er stadium subsidy includes the $20 million you intend to charge to Silicon Valley Power for the relocation of the Tasman Electric substation. That's the first red box at the top. The second one, all that is necessary is for the city of Santa Clara to submit the bill for the Tasman substation move in the amount of $20 million directly to Dr. John York, owner of the San Francisco 49ers instead. That is because the substation is being moved strictly for the benefit of the 49ers and for no one else. As we know, that substation is still there. That substation got expanded. It was not moved, and the Niners never paid that $20 million. That is big for where we are now, because if the Niners wanted to move that electrical substation, which generates power for a large area of Northern California, that $20 million price tag then, how much is it now? 35 million, 40 million, 50 million. The point here is it's going to cost a lot more money now to move that. What the Niners could also do when you look at this is move where their practice fields are. I think a potential big problem here is the fact that the practice fields are right alongside that electrical substation. There is a soccer complex to the top right of Levi Stadium there, and you see some grass available there potentially for the Niners. That could decrease the electromagnetic fields and the severity of it if you moved it over there. And then there's also an amusement park in Santa Clara that is being shut down, and that's a bunch of land where the Niners maybe at some point could look into moving their practice facility there. And then there is this study that I was sent that we're going to get into here in just a moment. A company with a guasmeter measured the EMF levels along the substation, around the stadium, around the performance facility, and by that youth soccer park. And we'll go through those findings here in just a second. But I do want to get back to some data here. And by the way, I mentioned Delanie Walker playing with the Niners from 2006 to 2012. He said there was chatter about this being a concern then. Christian McCaffrey, who was in the running for MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, and Comeback Player of the Year, one of the best running backs in the history of football. He's one of the Niners players who has voiced concerns about the electrical substation being next to the Niners practice facility and the potential dangers of EMF. CMC and his trainer reached out to Dr. Jack Kruse, who is one of the leading researchers and experts on this field, about this issue last year. Other Niners players have also reached out to Dr. Kruse, according to Dr. Kruse. And if you remember last year, Christian McCaffrey had bilateral Achilles tendonitis. This is an issue that lingered for much of the season. He only played 4 games, had to go overseas to get treatment, and then he suffered a knee injury that ended the season. He had bilateral Achilles tendonitis. He had to go overseas. George Kittle, also in this same time frame, had bilateral Achilles tendonitis and had to go overseas as well. It's a little bit odd, in my opinion, that CMC and George Kittle both had bilateral Achilles tendonitis. In the 2023 Super Bowl, Dre Greenlaw was dealing with the calf issue. He literally popped his Achilles, which changed the game for San Francisco because he was shutting down Travis Kelce then when he was just running onto the field after a special teams play. Logan Ryan was with the Niners in 2023. He said he's a believer in this theory. He said Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle spend millions of dollars on their body. They take care of themselves better than anybody, yet they've still gotten injured. And speaking of CMC, I know some people, because I tweeted this out, said Christian McCaffrey's been healthier with the Niners than he was with the Carolina Panthers. He definitely was injured with Carolina. But the first 3 years of his career, he did not miss a game. He played all 16 games in each of his first 3 seasons. He then played a combined 10 games his next 2 years, got traded to the Niners, was healthy in 2022, healthy in 2023, not healthy in 2024, back to being healthy in 2025. But Dr. Jack Kruse was also saying that something with fiber optics or EMF, it's also very prevalent in cities like Nashville, and the Titans injury problems have been bad, in addition to Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's why Dr. Jack Kruse had moved away from Tennessee, according to him. All right, let's get to some data findings here. Brian Suterer, I believe is how you say his name. He's a doctor, MD. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. I apologize if I messed that up. He has his own YouTube channel. He's a really good follow on X. Him and I have kind of gone back and forth. I don't really appreciate how he's talked to me at times, but it's fine. Obviously, him being a doctor, he's very passionate about this subject. I'm very passionate about this subject. He has some data that shows that during this time frame since 2013, the Niners might not be the most injured team in the NFL, but like their top 2, top 3, top 4. But Aaron Schatz, who is an injury expert as far as research goes, he has some really good findings. And then this is some of the data that I've worked on, that Peter Cowing has worked on, that others have worked on, that is pretty publicly out there. So since 2017 to 2025, the Niners have missed more than 2,000 games. And as recently as November, this was the most games missed in the NFL. So that is games lost in the National Football League. Remember when the Niners were playing the Houston Texans and Fox put up that graphic? Since Kyle Shanahan was hired in 2017, the 49ers have more than 2,000 games missed, most in the National Football League. So they were number 1 then at the start of November. It may have changed slightly at the end of the year with other teams resting players, sitting players, kind of tanking to get a better pick in the NFL draft. But since 2013, the Niners have been top 10 in adjusted games lost every year except for 2. So there are 32 teams in the NFL, for those of you not familiar. And this is where the Niners have ranked in top 10 adjusted games lost. 2013, they were 23rd. 2014, 28th. 2015, 27th. 2016, 24th. 2017, 22nd. Not great, but not awful. 2018, 26th. 2019, 27th. 2020, most injured team in the NFL, 32nd. 2021, 29th. 2022, 24th. 2023, they were actually one of the healthiest teams in football. They were 4th that year. That is by far and away the outlier for this stretch from 2013 to 2025. After that healthy season in 2023, finally they were top 5 as far as health goes. They were the most injured team again in 2024 at 32nd in adjusted games lost. And in 2025, they were 30th as of late this season. Some of that data is still coming in. Another thing that people who are detractors of this have said, this just coincides with Kyle Shanahan's tenure starting in 2017. And it's Kyle Shanahan and how he runs his scheme, which is physical and downhill, his practice methods, and how the Niners have had the same medical staff for the most part. It's Kyle Shanahan's regime that can be blamed for this. Well, Kyle Shanahan was hired in 2017. These injury problems started before him, starting in 2013. Now, Dustin Little, Dustin Perry, head of athletic training, head of strength and conditioning, I think they are issues in this conversation. I had this report a couple of months ago. I spoke with somebody who used to be an NFL trainer, somebody who also was an NFL trainer and a football trainer for high-level college football programs, and I was talking to him about these Niners injury problems. And he had said that among trainers, athletic trainers, people who specialize in weightlifting, physical therapists, it's well known in that community that what the Niners do from a strength and conditioning standpoint, recovery point of view, how they lift weights, their stretching techniques, it is known to be different compared to what other teams do across the NFL. And I'll talk more about the multitude of factors that could be playing into this coming up here in a second. But that's some of the data there. Furthermore, the amount of soft tissue injuries that the Niners have had is really concerning. And this is where the potential EMF dangers leading to soft tissue injuries comes into play. And we do need some more research here. And that's why Research Hub is sponsoring studies of $100,000 for scientists to research this. When it comes to hamstring and calf tears, the Niners have had more than 40 major or recurrent grade 3 tears. That is higher than the league baseline of 12 to 15 major tears per team per decade. According to Over the Cap, the 49ers had 20 players on a reserve list this season. That would be injured reserve, which accounted for more than $95 million in adjusted annual value on their contracts, the highest amount in the NFL by about $20 million. And this is why I did a video earlier this week sending a message to Niners owner Jed York. The Niners are worth nearly $9 billion. The Niners this year are hosting Super Bowl 60. Cash cow. The Niners as an organization have won 5 Super Bowls. That adds to the valuation of your organization. Jed York has sold stakes of the organization worth millions and billions of dollars. Jed York has invested and bought a professional soccer team, Leeds United. If he can invest into that soccer team, if the organization is worth this much money, yet these injuries are impacting severely your multi-billion-dollar business, you have to do something about this. You just have to. And especially when it comes to the health and the safety of your players. So Jed York, I hope you're watching this, and I'm talking about this because I want to help. Peter Cowan, he wants to help. Dr. Jesse Morris, he's been very vocal about this on X. He's a believer that this could be playing a role into the Niners' injury problems. He wants to help. I was also sent this data and study by Lightwork Home. And let me pop this up as well. So Lightwork Home, they are experts in environmental exposures, and they actually went on site to Levi Stadium, to the Niners practice facility to take measurements this month. Many have been asking for actual studies from me and others and expert analysis. So this is of note, and here's what their study entailed. Lightwork Home Health visited the area to measure the extremely low frequency magnetic field strength, ELF-MF. Their findings: near the transmission lines around the perimeter of the facility, they measured 4.7 to 22 milligauss, roughly 5 to 20 times higher than typical residential environments. Further from the lines, they measured 0.3 to 1 milligauss, which is typical for most towns and cities. They were unable to access the facility itself, so indoor levels remain unknown. Strong evidence across multiple meta-analysis or analyses links continuous exposure above 3 milligauss with increased childhood leukemia risk. And that threshold is exceeded in many areas surrounding the facility. Firm conclusions cannot be drawn without readings from inside the facility, but unusually elevated exposure alongside an atypical injury pattern warrants further investigation. And Lightwork Home Health, they tagged John Lynch in this, and they said that they would look into this pro bono because they want to help. How awesome is that? The full briefing is available at lightworkhome.com/49ers. But you look at the guasmeter readings, 22, 12.5 toward that bottom left corner of Levi Stadium, where the Niners practice facility is, 6.5, 4.7, 9.5. That youth soccer park, 7.1, 5.1, 5.3. And I know some people have also said, look into the injuries from the youth soccer park. I think that is worth doing as well. Some people have said, well, what about electricians and linemen who work in this field? Why aren't they dealing with some of these health problems? I'll also say they're not playing professional football. So I think that's a little bit different, but I think that is also worth looking into. So here's been my thought kind of all along, right? I care about the health of athletes. I care about the health of the Niners. I care about the health of people and society in general. My mom passed away as a healthy person of cancer in 2018. When that happens to you and you see somebody who's been so healthy, active for their entire life, pass away suddenly of cancer, it changes your whole thought process and your whole viewpoint of health and medicine. And it has forced me into becoming more passionate about holistic health and homeopathic remedies naturally. So when the injury rates have been so alarming for so long, I think anything can and should be questioned and looked into at this point. And I think there are multiple factors at play here. I've maintained this the entire time. I think what the Niners have to do, they have to look at their athletic training staff. They have to look at their practice regimen under Kyle Shanahan. They have to look at their style of play, their weight training methods, their recovery practices, and also the potential role of the electrical substation being located right next to the Niners practice facility and where their practice fields are. So I'm glad that the Niners are looking into it. I hope they actually take this seriously and that wasn't some politician-like answer from John Lynch to just beat around the bush and say, yeah, we'll look into it. They legitimately have to. And the players want them to, because Noah Furtado of the San Francisco Chronicle did an article on all of this. He talked to players in the locker room, and credit to him for doing this, because some of the backlash I've gotten on social media has been crazy, and it's wild because all I'm worried about is the health of people. But Noah talked to a couple Niners players. Edge rusher Bryce Huff, was one of the seemingly countless Niners who dealt with a hamstring injury this past year, his first in Santa Clara. Short of sounding an alarm, Huff voiced concern, suggesting a half-hearted bout of humor that he was not above conducting his own research. He said, I might just pull out a meter one day. At this point, I'm going to find out. If it is impacting my body, I want to know. I wouldn't want to just sit around and hope for the best. Everybody's been talking about it, especially with the George Kittle injury and the stuff that's happened with Fred and Nick and really all the injuries. I honestly don't know if it's real or not, but hopefully they measure it out, see what kind of EMF we're picking up on the field. I know EMF and all that stuff can impact you. Radio waves can impact you in some kind of way. If there is something, I hope it's enough or it's not enough to damage our bodies, especially with our profession. Chase Lucas, defensive back, said if it's a true thing, then the owners of the team should take action towards it. But it's a multi-billion-dollar business. They're not going to just move their stadium or tell them to move an electrical plant. Why think about it when there's no real answer to it? I ain't got the bucks to move the stadium. If I could, I would, though. So he said I'd move the stadium. Center Jake Brendel acknowledged at least one of the teammates is convinced that EMF waves have played a role in the Niners' injuries. Quote, there's no reason to deny the fact that someone on the team thinks the substation probably is doing something to you. And I mean, there is a reason why people don't usually live by those. It might just be because they're unsightly and they make noise, or it might be other reasons. Linebacker Luke Gifford, to me, it would make sense if it was exposure over a long period of time. So who knows? Trent Taylor, all I know is that there's truth to the science that's presented. The question is it actually strong enough to where we're feeling it on the practice field or in the weight room to where it really has an effect? Let's say it affects you 1% or even a fraction of a percent, Jake Brendel said. When it comes to professional athletes, we're trying to optimize everything about our lives. And I've talked about this as well. An athlete's body is everything to them. It is their livelihood. Of course, they want to stay healthy because that is how they make their money as professional athletes. So a long show today. If you made it until the end of the video, I want you to type real one down below. More of a podcast style investigative type of episode. But I have a news background. Used to be a news reporter on television. And I am very passionate about health and wellness. And I want the Niners to be a healthy football team. So the Niners have to look into all of these avenues to try to figure out why for such a long period of time they've been suffering from all these injuries. Hope you enjoyed the show. Joe Rogan, if you're watching, you or your team, I'd love to come on the show alongside Peter Cowan to talk about this. I've been a big Joe Rogan fan for a long time because I just think that he's a very curious person like myself, and he has some really fascinating conversations with some really fascinating people. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Give me a follow on social media at Chase_Senior. Don't worry. We talk Niners football here as well, and we'll continue to do that. Take care. Thank you for tuning in. See you later.